Welcome to Storyflix. In this video, we will explain Central Intelligence. This film tells the story of a fat boy who is always bullied by his friends suddenly becomes a world-class CIA agent. Will the reunion of two friends stop a great crime? Let's find out in Central Intelligence. Central Intelligence began in 1996 where a fat young man named Robbie Weirdich was seen in his school's locker room. While they were taking a shower, several students were seen catching Robbie and intending to prank him. Meanwhile, all Central High School students were gathered in the basketball court hall for a farewell ceremony. In the event, a student named Calvin Joyner was named the best student for his outstanding achievements. After that, Calvin then gave a speech that aroused the enthusiasm of the students with fiery. But in the middle of the speech, suddenly the students appeared, led by a student named Trevor Olson who carried Robbie's innocent body and slid him onto the slippery basketball court floor. Suddenly, this made Robbie the center of attention because he was completely naked. The students laughed and mocked Robbie, except for Calvin who showed his concern by directly giving his jacket to him to cover his body. With immeasurable shame, Robbie immediately left the place. The scene then switches to the year 2016, 20 years after the embarrassing incident. Calvin has worked in a well-known company as an accountant and married Maggie, his girlfriend in high school. While he was at the office, Calvin received a notification about his school reunion. Not only that, he also received a friend notification on Facebook from someone named Bob Stone. After receiving a friend request from Bob Stone, he gets a message from him saying that he is Robbie Weirdich, his friend at Central High School. Robbie then invites Calvin to meet at a bar. In the evening, Calvin and Bob meet at a bar. How surprised Calvin was when he found out that Robbie, who was once very fat, had now become a man with a stout and athletic body. The two got into an argument that ended in a fistfight at the bar. But Bob can handle it easily because now he is also a martial arts expert. Bob then asks Calvin to let him stay at his place for the night. Calvin, who was kind, of course gave his friend permission to stay at his house. Arriving at Calvin's house, Bob asked Calvin for help to review some online transactions on a site. He finds auctions and offers for bank accounts containing millions of dollars destined for the mafia and other criminal organizations. The auction or bidding of these accounts will end in 14 hours. Calvin's laptop hangs when the two try to find out about the auction. He asked Bob about the auction site, but Bob answered convolutedly as if he was hiding something. Bob then spent the night sleeping on the sofa. Calvin was ready to go to work the following day, while Bob was still sleeping. Not long after, there was a knock on the door, and when he opened the door, he was startled by the appearance of several CIA agents. A female CIA agent named Pamela Harris said that they were looking for a fugitive named Bob Stone. Calvin then tells the CIA agents that Bob is at his house. However, when the CIA agents went inside, Bob had disappeared somewhere and the room was tidy. Agent Harris says that Bob Stone was a CIA agent, but he trespasses by stealing information about the existence of an auction site for bank accounts containing millions of dollars and intends to sell them to the mafia. Not only that, he is also suspected of having killed his partner, Phil, when they were both on a mission to get the information. Calvin, who just learned the truth about Bob, finally decides to help CIA agents catch him. Agent Harris uses Calvin to lure Bob out of hiding. They set the plan in Calvin's office. Sure enough, Bob immediately called Calvin in his office and asked him to meet downstairs. The CIA agents immediately rushed downstairs to arrest Bob. But as it turned out, it was all Bob's ploy. When the CIA agents leave Calvin alone in his room, Bob appears and tells Calvin he needs his help. But Calvin, who thinks Bob is a bad person, doesn't want to help him and informs the CIA. A shootout between Bob and the CIA agents was inevitable, until finally Bob and Calvin managed to escape from that place. To avoid being chased by CIA agents, Bob says that he is not a traitor. He instead wants to catch a criminal called the Black Badger who has killed his partner, Phil. He assumes that Black Badger has a satellite code that can access all of those million-dollar accounts, and he needs Calvin's ability to track down the Black Badger who will sell the satellite code to the highest bidder. When they stop somewhere to pull out the GPS tracker in the car, they are attacked by a bounty hunter. Bob is successfully paralyzed by the bounty hunter, while Calvin escapes on a motorcycle. While Calvin is on his way to his house, Agent Harris intercepts him and confirms that Bob is a CIA agent who has defected. Agent Harris then speculates that Bob is most likely the Black Badger himself. She asks Calvin not to tell his wife about all this for their safety. After that, Agent Harris gave Calvin a tracking device linked to the CIA system, so they would immediately know where he was when he pushed the button. Calvin then sees Maggie for their marriage counseling session, where he meets Bob, who is disguised as a consultant. After a mock counseling session, Bob again convinces him to help him. Long story short, Calvin arranges a meeting with Trevor Olson. He turns out to be working at an international financial company that can track transactions on overseas bank accounts to locate the deal between the Black Badger and its potential buyer. Olson, who used to bully Robbie because of his obesity, is not afraid to see Robbie, who has now turned into a burly and tough man. After meeting with Olson, Calvin is contacted by Agent Harris, who threatens to arrest Maggie if he fails to help them catch Bob. Calvin was forced to betray Bob and told their location so that CIA agents immediately came and arrested him. Bob is captured and taken to a secret CIA hideout. Agent Harris tries to dig up information about Phil's murder and the Black Badger, but Bob was silent. Agent Harris then tortures Bob to get him to confess, but her efforts were also fruitless. Bob still didn't open his mouth. Calvin, feeling sorry for Bob, decides to help him escape. They then manage to catch several CIA agents and escape from there. Without further ado, Calvin immediately entered Olson's account and transaction codes on the CIA's tracking device. He learned that the deal would take place in Boston's underground parking garage. Calvin then helps Bob steal the plane and they fly straight to Boston. Arriving at the parking building, Bob asked Calvin to wait for him outside, while he entered the meeting location alone. Not long after, Agent Harris, who also knew the location, entered the building. Calvin, who saw it, assumed that the woman was the Black Badger and intended to tell Bob. However, Calvin instead messes up Bob's meeting with a potential buyer, where Bob claims to be the Black Badger. Bob then shoots Calvin, but grazes him in the neck, lest the man receive a fatal wound. Just as Bob is about to continue his dealings, Phil suddenly appears and reveals himself to be the real Black Badger, faking his death. Calvin, who managed to get up from the gunshot wound, looks confused about who the Black Badger really is. Is it Bob or Phil? The situation became chaotic when Agent Harris and the armed forces ambushed them all and a fierce firefight ensued. Calvin tries to retrieve the 2 flash drives containing Bob and Phil's satellite code lying in the middle of the battle. Calvin manages to retrieve it, but the mob boss, who wants to buy the code from Bob, realizes this and immediately chases Calvin in a car. Bob saves Calvin just before the mob boss hits him, and Bob manages to kill the mob boss. Calvin managed to escape and Phil followed him, until finally he was surrounded by Bob and Phil on a bridge. Phil tries to convince Calvin that Bob is the real Black Badger and asks him to hand him the codes. Bob, who felt disapproved, then started shooting at Phil. While Phil and Bob are fighting, Calvin, who thinks Bob is the real criminal, picks up a gun and shoots him. But then Phil reveals that he is the real Black Badger and manages to take Calvin hostage. Calvin tries to free himself by doing somersaults, and when Phil's attention is distracted, Bob kills him by slitting his throat with lightning speed and throwing him into the lake. Bob then apologizes to Calvin for shooting him. He was forced to do this so that the mafia did not kill him. Calvin also apologizes for not trusting Bob and already suspecting him of being a bad person. The scene shifts to show Calvin and Bob arriving on time for their 20th year high school reunion in a CIA helicopter. Agent Harris, who accompanied them, apologized to Bob for suspecting him of being a Black Badger and wanted him to return to work for the CIA. On the other hand, Calvin finally reconciles with Maggie and promises to mend their marriage. Afterward, Calvin reveals to Maggie that he hacked the voting system to elect the prom king and crown Bob Stone as the prom king at the reunion. Everyone looked confused because they didn't know Bob Stone, and finally it was revealed that he was Robbie Weirdicht, the fat student who had been humiliated by Olson and his friends at the school farewell party 20 years ago. Trevor Olson appeared, then tried to embarrass Bob again in front of everyone, but it was Bob who was different from Robbie now. He was able to defend himself and punched Olson to teach him a lesson. Bob then gave an uplifting speech in which he revealed that he is Robbie Weirdicht, who always strives to be better and overcome every obstacle. Not to forget, he also praised Calvin as his true friend. Bob then relives the embarrassing incident by taking off all his clothes. But now, everyone is in awe of his muscular and athletic body. He also meets Darla, the girl he had a crush on in high school, and asks her to dance. The film ends by showing Maggie, who is pregnant, and Calvin has joined the CIA. As a gift for his first day on the job, Bob picks up Calvin in a new Chevrolet Silverado and returns the jacket he gave him when he had an embarrassing incident at school, which he had been keeping all this time. The two friends finally leave to start their day as CIA agents.